Let me introduce myself. My name's Maryam. I'm a columnist for The Independent, amongst other things. I also chair a think tank called the Social Market Foundation. We've got a wonderful array of guests here. Ian Edgar, here on my right, is an anthropologist based in Durham, and he focuses on dreaming and the imagination, with particular reference to Islam and the culture of jihad. And his book was published only last week, The Dream in Islam. Is that right?
That's right, yes.
Copies of which available, blah, blah, blah. Maryam Namazie here is head of the Council of Ex-Muslims in Britain. She's a vocal critic of Islamism and Sharia law, and she's one of Elle magazine's top women of the year. How does it feel to be a top woman?
Not that great.
And Lauren Booth is a broadcaster, journalist, and human rights activist. She converted to Islam in 2010, last year.
Yeah,
is that right?
8 months.
Okay, and she is now a presenter for the Iranian news network Press TV. And we're going to talk about Islam, which is the most widely discussed religion in the West. It has its fans, it has its critics, both of which are up here on the stage. We're going to talk about Islamic values, what's the relationship between Islam and Islamism, and are we guilty of Islamophobia? And what I'm going to do is ask each panellist to talk for just a few minutes each to give you an idea of what they think. Then we're going to have a discussion and then plenty of time for questions and answers from you guys. So, Ian Edgar.
Hello, thank you. Well, hello and... Hello? Just say, okay, is that, can you hear at the back? Yeah, okay, but not too far back. Okay, well, yes, the title of the festival is How the Light Got In, and I think that's an interesting metaphor to think about in terms of religion and spirituality and Islam, because the beginnings of my interest is particularly around the area of dream and vision and how that influences events in this world. As an anthropologist, I look at action and behavior and event. And for many Muslims, going back really well to Abraham, they are the Abrahamic religions, and in the Quran, the beginnings of Islam began through the Abraham's dream about sacrificing his son. The Prophet Muhammad was a great dreamer, and 146 of the Quran is thought to have come via dreams. And this history of dreaming and vision has been central right through the history of Islam. And today, the conclusion of my book, for those who don't bother to write, is that this is actually a common feature of all the many branches of Islam today, from Wahhabis, Salafis, Sufis, and Shia. All have a central relationship to an Islamic notion of the unconscious, which also sits to a degree with Western psychoanalytical concepts. So the idea that the inner world is of potential important reality, and centrally through dream and vision. Often the words are confounded in Arabic. The word is the same, al-ruya, for true dream and vision, is an aspect that is not particularly well known about in the West, but is also of interest to many people.
Thank you. Maryam.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's a wonderful pleasure to be here. I mean, my take on it is that obviously Islam is not fundamentally very different from other religions. I think all religions are equally bad. As an atheist myself, let me put that on the table right away. But I think the reason that we talk a lot about Islam is not because it's growing in popularity, quite the opposite. I know we often hear about how, people are... it's the fastest growing religion, but I'd like to see a study on how many people are actually leaving it or would like to leave if they were allowed to. So in that sense, I think it's not quite accurate. My problem with Islam, apart from the problem I have with religion in general, is that it's sort of the difference between Christianity today and Christianity during an Inquisition. And I believe that we're living under an Islamic Inquisition today. So that actually a lot of Muslims who are actually the first victims of Islamism and at the forefront of resisting Islamism, because actually the greatest opponents of Islamism are people who live under Islamic laws. Here, I mean, it's called racism and Islamophobia. You see real battles taking place in many of those countries. And I think in that situation, it makes it a very different phenomenon, because you're not allowed to leave. Apostasy is punishable by death in many countries right today. And you still have people being stoned to death in the 21st century, amputations and so on and so forth. I know in Britain we don't have that, but we do have Sharia courts, for example, in which women and children's rights in particular are discriminated to a really great extent. And even though it's family aspects of civil of Sharia law and not the criminal aspects of it, you still find that women and children in particular are facing tremendous problems and violence as a result. So I think we need to be wary of Islam, and we need to fight Islamism. And I think it's important to show solidarity with people who are fighting it across the globe. I think the problem is that it's equated with, if you criticize Islam and Islamism, it's equated with racism. You have the far right that actually blames Muslims and immigrants for Islamism, and that's not the case. In fact, Islamism was brought to center stage by Western government policy during the Cold War as a way of creating a green belt around the Soviet Union at the time. It wasn't concocted in some immigrant's kitchen in London, And so in that sense, I think we need to be very clear. We need to fight Islamism. Islam is its banner, and therefore, clearly, it is going to be up for criticism. And freedom of expression is crucial in this day and age, I think. Freedom of criticism matters most when you're criticizing that which is sacred and taboo, and I think we have to defend that right, as we must defend the rights of people who are fighting against it. Thank you.
Laura Booth.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, in the name of God, the most beneficent, the most merciful, and I'm going to offer you the Islamic greeting now, Assalamu alaikum, which is peace be upon you. I wouldn't have imagined a year ago that I would be sitting before festival goers in a hijab, greeting you as a Muslim, but here I am. Amazing things happen in this universe, and some of them come from dreams and visions, and other from life experience. I first started working within the Muslim community around the world in 2005, when I went to the Gaza Strip and the West Bank as a journalist. I was not seeking to find any religion, and I was not unhappy with my life. In fact, I was very, very happy with my life. But what I saw there in the practice of Islam, particularly in the Gaza Strip, turned a key in my heart that opened a door and let the light in. I remember being in the Rafah refugee camp, and a woman invited me with the greeting Fadal, which means share and welcome, into her pathetic hovel of a home. And I was angry, and I said, why on earth does your God make you fast for 30 days in Gaza when you're already hungry, when you're already unhappy? I had the image of Allah, the image of Islam as this controlling force that produced hatred and confinement. And this woman who offered me a few leaves and all of the hummus and bread that she had for her family said, "Sister, I fast to remember the poor." And in that beautiful moment, and in other subsequent moments in the last 5 years, I have seen a life of faith that is completely at odds with the aggressive nature of Islamism that we read about. I have lived in homes and villages and travelled across the UK and America to the Muslim community, and I have transcended at certain moments, if we can use that word, the here and now, to look at myself and the wider community in a more generous, kinder and more faith-filled way. And I hope we can explore that today, inshallah. Thank you.
Great. Well, let's start discussing this. I'd like to start with you, Lauren, because you were brought up Roman Catholic, am I right?
No, I was born, kind of. My father was a lapsed Roman Catholic, which broadly meant that he drank a lot of beer and had a lot of children because he wouldn't use a condom. My mother was, I suppose, a superstitious Christian in that she'd never consider going to church, but she'd hang crosses around the bed to keep the boogeyman away.
And so did you grow up with a Christian faith or none at all?
Well, like I say, Christianity is superstition in the 70s, a kind of residual Judeo-Christian value system where you don't steal and you don't kill, and we know that comes from the Ten Commandments, but it didn't practice itself in any particular way.
Because I'd like to talk about the need for religion in our lives and whether that craving for religion leads people towards Islam in particular because it's the most overtly religious.
Perhaps I can just say that I remember very physically when I was 7 years old, despite having these parents who didn't teach me about religion, praying. I think it's a natural instinct. I remember the prayers of a 7-year-old go something like, please make mummy and daddy nicer, God. Please, God, make my sister disappear, not in a bad way, but just for a few days. But that feeling that your parents aren't the top body, the top source of authority, I think is in children. And I see it in my children.
Ian, do you think we're naturally religious? And do you think we crave a religious structure to our lives?
It's rather difficult to speak on behalf of 6 billion people, but you know, I'll make a short stab at it. I mean, I think people have curiosity and have rationality and have self-consciousness and reflective consciousness, and that leads into various spiritual kind of understandings of the big questions. I mean, religions are formations of that. In a sense, humans have always been travelling out of Africa endlessly, and on the way have built highways of faith, which may or may not correspond to any kind of ultimate reality that humans with their particular understanding can only dimly grasp at their best. So there is something going on, and religions are a performance of that something. But my own position would be that really it's rather arrogant to assume that any one religion or any particular formation, metaphysical formation of this world is actually going to be final and complete. I think to me it's more important to journey with the question.
Ian, that's really interesting what you said there. I think, you know, finding the ultimate truth, but you'd say, wouldn't you also say it's arrogant to presume as mankind that there is no other truth except for our own experience in our heads, and that the denial of God is also an arrogance?
Well, I mean, why I'm interested in dreaming particularly, a microphone, is that it is the only, in a sense, altered state of consciousness that all humans regularly experience, which unless you're a lucid dreamer or a Tibetan yogic Buddhist dreamer, you have this experience which various cultures have defined in different ways, and usually have a big dream tradition of some kind, but that there's something happens to people which they experience but they don't actually create, and that is the only, in a sense, inner empirical evidence of that which is not the ego. So that's why particularly I tune into the dream as being, because all the religions may just be made up by some charismatic or despotic person, usually a guy, but your own experience of selfhood and of the kind of manifold mysteries of dreaming and of how time and space get muddled and the phantasmagoric, and then the story of literal dreaming, which many people experience, for instance, and it goes on like that. And so that is the kind of, in a sense, an essence of the mystery of being human, and that's why I plug into that energy source.
Maryam, you're an atheist now. You were brought up Muslim?
Yes, yeah. I don't think it's instinctual religion. I think it's taught. I find it interesting how children, for example, are not called conservative children or socialist children or liberal children because their parents are socialist or conservative or liberal. But when it comes to religion, children are automatically labelled the religion of their parents. They're given the opportunity to choose their politics when they grow older, but not religion. And so in a way, I don't think it is instinctual. It's taught. And in our house, for example, I have a 5-year-old, and we obviously haven't taught him about God and this and that. So when he started going to school, he came home one day and asked, "What's God?" And I was trying to think what I'm going to say to him, because I don't want to brainwash my child either and indoctrinate him. I want him to think freely and be able to decide for himself. And then he told me, I know what it is, Mom, I know what it is. Oh, God, oh, God. And he just heard people saying that, and he assumes that's what God is. So I do think that it's taught. And I volunteer at his school, actually, and I heard the teacher asking the children, who loves you? And most children raised their hand and said, well, my mommy and daddy love me, or my brothers and sisters love me, my nan and granddad. And then there are 1 or 2 kids who are are quite religious, their families are religious, and they raised their hand and said, Jesus loves me or Allah